My son killed me. Yes, you read that correctly. I am not a ghost or an evil spirit that needs rescuing. I have a brave heart. My name is Megan, and I hope to inspire you with my story. I lived with my father and my sister Marlene after the death of my mother, who died from an illness. Though I was only 18 years old, I became responsible for taking care of my whole family. I did everything for them, like cooking, cleaning, washing, etc. My father was a great man, and he did his best to make us happy. I supported both my sister and my father. We faced a lot of problems together, illnesses, financial problems, school, and the like. But there came a day when I had to make a life and death decision at my young, tender age. I fell in love, as any girl my age tends to do. My sweetheart turned out to be loved my neighbor, a guy named Dave. We had grown up together, and we shared everything. Love, sadness, jokes. Our dreams had evolved as we grew up too, so we decided to marry. He knew all about my life circumstances, so he chose a flat near my family for me. We had a nice party and celebrated with our families and friends. Every day, he proved himself to be a responsible man. He loved and respected me, and I him. Finishing my studies was one of my dreams, and Dave supported me in every way to achieve it. But my biggest dream was to have a baby. But sometimes life just isn't fair. One day, while cleaning the house, my heart began beating rapidly, and I couldn't breathe well. I was barely able to call out to Dave, who came immediately when he heard me cry for help. I had had this symptom before when I was younger, but I never told my father because I didn't want to worry him. Dave took me to the hospital, where a doctor said I had a serious heart condition. And not only that, I was pregnant too. Pregnancy and a heart condition do not a good combination make. So we had to choose between the baby's life or mine. My father and Dave asked me to abort the baby, though they tried hard to persuade me. I resolutely refused. I agonized a lot during my pregnancy. My father and Dave were so worried for my safety. My father and Marlene left their flat to live with me. In addition, Dave cut back on his working hours to stay with me. The day came when I went into labor. They took me to the hospital, where the doctor checked me over and pronounced that my condition was so serious that I wouldn't be able to survive the childbirth. My family and I were shocked. I held Dave's hand and told him that I was strong enough to survive this. Dave hugged me, crying tears like a river. I was so afraid, but I did my best to hide that fact. I looked to my protruding belly and said to my baby, "I want you to know that I sacrificed myself for you. You had better grow up to be a great young man. I love you." Then the baby started pushing its way into this world. The scene fades to blackness. The baby is born. Suddenly, a year later, a birthday party is being held. The baby is now 1 year old. A woman is singing with the baby and her family. The woman looks at you and winks. Megan says, "Haha, fooled you. I lived through the childbirth. Sometimes life gives us a second chance, but you have to be willing to accept the risk." A teacher often serves as a role model for his students. His morality, social conscience, manners, intelligence, personality, emotional savvy, and depth and breadth of knowledge are always on display. If these are all exemplary, he or she gains his students' respect, admiration, and reverence in the hearts. My name is Patty, and I am 17 years old. I am in my senior year at a prestigious secondary school renowned for having excellent teachers in all subjects. I am so proud of my school because they use modern, creative ways to teach in class. When I tell my friends about my school, they, being in lesser quality schools, usually don't believe me. One of our teachers recently gave birth to a new baby and took maternity leave, so our school had to hire a substitute teacher to cover her class in her absence. When he entered our classroom for the first time, we were awestruck by how handsome, intelligent, and elegant he was. All the girls adored him, including myself. I would rarely hear most of his explanations because I would be so focused on his enchanted eyes. Soon, I noticed that he liked me too. I wanted to know more about him, so I explored his Facebook page and concocted silly reasons to need to speak with him. We chatted on numerous occasions. During one such chat, he spontaneously asked me to send him my photo, but I was instantly uneasy with that request. It raised a red flag with me. It seemed creepy and inappropriate. I used the excuse that my mom had forbidden me from sending my picture on my phone, and was shocked when he took offense at my declining to do as he asked. He threatened me, saying that if I didn't send him nude pictures of myself, that he would use Photoshop to create such pictures of me and send them around the school. I was dumbfounded, numb, fearful. I told him we could meet tomorrow and talk some more. He warned me not to tell anyone about our relationship, or else he would ruin my life. I promptly made screenshots of all our previous conversations. I resolved to always turn on my voice recorder app each time right before we would meet again. I succeeded in making him feel relaxed enough that he spoke freely about his feelings and desires. Then I excused myself at some point and told him I had to go home because Mom had wanted me home to go somewhere with her. Instead, I went straight to the police station and told them about this substitute teacher and his indecent requests of me and his threat about ruining my life. I let them listen to our recorded conversations. They said that other students had complained about him before too, but they hadn't been able to get the concrete evidence that I had assembled. He had repeated this routine on different teenage students in several states. When he failed to return to school after I talked to the police that afternoon, I was the only one who knew what had happened to him. Could you live with yourself if you found out your whole life turned out to be a lie? That you are not who you thought you were? My story may strike you as a silly Hollywood drama, but every word of it is true, I swear. My name is Tasha, and I am 19 years old. I am in the 12th grade, and I live with my family in a posh mansion. I was an only child, so my parents spoiled me by giving me everything I could ask for. Love, protection, the finest education, material things. My father always worried for my safety. He was so protective that it annoyed me, though I loved him for it. I lived the life that every teenager could only dream about. I had a car, money, and the ability to travel the world if I so desired. The only strain on my existence, as it were, was when I discovered a secret about my life, which is what this story is about. It was the first day of a new school year. The school day was over, and I was walking home with my friends when I noticed a woman standing across the street. She was watching me closely, as if she knew me. Perhaps I resembled one of her friends or relatives. This situation repeated itself on many occasions. Her stalking of me made me feel uneasy, even though she didn't look threatening in the least. So one day, I decided to exit out of the back side of the school instead of the front side. Then I peeked around the corner of the school building to observe her. She was scanning the exiting students carefully, one by one. She looked annoyed that she couldn't find me. Then I sneaked around behind her and tapped her on the shoulder. When she turned around and saw me, her face lit up with joy. I told her that I had seen her watching me every day and asked her why she was doing so. It seemed that she wanted to burst into a lengthy conversation, but instead she stopped herself and calmly handed me a letter. Then she began crying and left me quickly. I resisted opening the letter until I got home, sat down, and got comfortable. Then I proceeded to open the letter. It contained a calendar date and a simple note. Research this date and you will know everything. I browsed the internet for events that happened on that date. There were many hits. One hit was a news article about a woman who had killed her husband. Her husband had been constantly abusing her and her baby girl, so the woman had sold her daughter to a rich man to protect her life. When her husband discovered what she had done, he began beating her severely, and in self-defense, she killed him. I was shocked to read that the rich man she had sold the baby to was none other than my dad. I felt like I was in an Asian Indian movie. I'm in a quandary as to what I should do. Do you have any suggestions? Any advice? Please. A teacher earns the respect of his students and also serves as an exemplary role model. Unfortunately, student adoration of teachers is on the wane in society now. Students owe teachers some degree of loyalty for contributing to their success in life. But what if you discovered that your teacher was on the run from the law? How would you feel? Would you want to know? Lend an ear to my story. I am Erica, and I am 17 years old. I live with my parents and my sister Felicia. My lifelong dream was to excel in all areas of life. I did well in school, and my parents noticed my stellar intellect from an early age. So they encouraged and supported my education in every way. I loved and respected all the teachers who ever taught me. I respected them for their efforts, and I took a dim view of my fellow students who didn't respect them. I even respected the teachers who taught me unimportant subjects. Though I respected all my teachers, past and present, I hadn't yet found any worthy of being a good role model for me to follow until one day a new chemistry teacher, Mr. Franklin, came to our school when our previous teacher resigned to travel abroad with her family. From the very first moment when he first entered the classroom, I was charmed by his charisma. He seemed quiet, self-confident, and venerable. But it wasn't just me. All the students were impressed by his presence. His explanations were much clearer than our previous teachers. With every passing day, I loved him more and more. I had chosen a good role model. I was amazed by his resume qualifications and his erudition and experience. I liked to chat with him on breaks to benefit from his experience, wisdom, and insights. He never indicated that I was an annoyance to him. Instead, he welcomed all my questions openly and cheerfully and shared his knowledge freely. I didn't want to let him down, so I studied very hard. He was so worldly and street smart that we nicknamed him the Thug because he seemed to know exactly how the world operated and how to get around obstacles. We figured he was either an alien from space or a thug wanted by the law. Then one day while browsing the internet, I came upon a strange coincidence. I read about an intelligent serial killer who committed brutal crimes without leaving a trace. Some witnesses had seen him and described him to the police. The resultant face sketches looked exactly like Mr. Franklin, as if he had a twin brother. The first thought that came into my mind was that this was one weird coincidence. When I went to school the next day, I showed him the news article and the sketch of the serial killer. When he saw the sketch, his features darkened. He asked me where I had read this news, and I told him that it was from a news website. He agreed that the similarity between him and the sketch was uncanny, but he seemed unconcerned, disinterested even. I was wondering if Mr. Franklin were to be the killer, what his motivation for killing might be. The next few days strengthened my suspicions when I heard about a murder in our neighborhood, which coincided with a time when Mr. Franklin was not at school. When he subsequently returned to school, he looked worried and nervous. If he were the killer, why would he risk coming back to school? I then began to consider that he might be planning to kill me because I knew his dirty little secret. I had trouble for sleeping for the next few days. Then one day after visiting one of my friends, I was walking home when I sensed that someone was following me. I began walking more quickly, and the footsteps sped up proportionately. Suddenly, I felt a touch on my shoulder. I spun around to see Mr. Franklin. He gestured for me not to speak. I nodded okay. He then told me that he has a brother named Rodriguez, who was actually the serial killer that I had shown him in the news article. He said his brother followed him everywhere to torment him and cause trouble for him. He told me that he had to leave the city, and I was very sad to hear that. He hoped that we would meet again someday. After his disappearance from school, my mind was full of questions. Was he telling the truth? was he truly innocent? I hope I find out the answers to my questions someday.